That was one of the craziest days that I've ever seen.
Also tonight, the motivation behind another deadly mass shooting in the U.S.
We must be clear. It was not just racially motivated, it was racist violence.
And
what a night for the Canadians. Sensational performance in so many different events.
Canada wins big at this year's World Athletics Championships. That's later, but first. It has been a wildfire season for the Canadian record books, with more than 137,000 square kilometres of land scorched across the country to date. Later, we'll hear about the situation in BC, but first to the fires in the Northwest Territories, where crews have had a challenging time protecting the town of Hay River. Most people who live there have been evacuated, including the mayor, Candace Jamieson.
Everything that we have to throw at this, we are. And so far, so good. We haven't lost any people. And so I do implore anybody that's in the community, if you have options, you really need to look at them.
Firefighters have managed to hold the blaze at about 1.5 kilometres away from the centre of Hay River and about 1 kilometre away from the airport. But there are worries about rising temperatures. Mike Westwick is a fire information officer for the Northwest Territories.
Some pretty heavy winds, and again, just continued very dry conditions in the area, very unseasonal. It's conditions that would support severe fire activity and support growth to the north and the east. It's a challenging situation, but again, over the past few weeks, there has been a lot of hard-fought firefighting efforts that have got us in a place where we're ready to push back on this thing.
Westwick says crews are also making good progress tackling the fire that has been threatening Yellowknife. It is burning about 15 kilometres northwest of the city. But it's a very different story for the devastated hamlet of Enterprise. Almost all of the town was wiped out by fires 2 weeks ago. Smoke still can be seen smouldering. Professional damage assessors with insurance companies need to come in before cleanup can begin. The CBC's Juanita Taylor got an exclusive tour of the town with the mayor to witness the damage firsthand.
This property was the Poiriers. This is Daryl Dobbs.
Enterprise Mayor Mike St. Amour knows where everybody in his town lives.
This is the Flaman residence.
Easy to do when there are only less than 50 homes in his hamlet of about 100 people. But where houses and businesses once stood, now piles of ashes.
This is a motel that used to be there, Gateway Gas Motel. They had just finished renovating. It's scary.
Mangled metal litters the ground, and trees that once surrounded the property charred. St. Amour says he had to call everyone to tell them the news.
The roughest day I had was calling the people, telling them that they'd lost everything. That was the hardest day of my life. It still hurts.
St. Amour is one of the lucky ones.
And that on the corner is my residence.
His is one of about a dozen homes still standing after a ferocious wildfire tore through Enterprise on August 13th.
All we could see is a big plume of smoke, and it was coming this way.
Not the case for 30 other families, including Natasha Cleary, her husband, and their 6 children, who are now taking refuge in Nampa, Alberta.
It was very emotional. We both broke down and we cried, and I mean, the kids don't quite understand, but they felt it.
Cleary and her family rushed from Enterprise as the fire grew by the second.
Just a big cloud of black smoke coming, and bigger by the minute. And you kind of get into just a panic mode.
It just moved at an unbelievable pace.
Fire Information Officer Mike Westwick says winds reached up to 70 to 80 kilometers that day.
That was one of the craziest days that I've ever seen or even heard of in terms of fire management in the Northwest Territories.
The situation so dangerous, fire crews had to be pulled out. Mayor St. Amour says his hamlet was left on its own, and now he wants action from all levels of government.
Step up. Quit talking and start doing. Quit shifting blame. If there's a mistake and heads need to roll, they should. People's lives here. There shouldn't be an excuse.
He wants money to help his residents scattered across Alberta to help get by until they can return home.
We're going to try and get them here before the snow falls.
Despite it all, St. Amour remains hopeful.
It's sad. I'm sad. heartbroken, sad, but I'm optimistic. We're gonna pull together and we're gonna fix it. With help or not, we're gonna rebuild.
For now, the focus continues to be preventing the fire from hitting other communities. CBC requested an interview with the territorial government, but did not hear back in time. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Enterprise, Northwest Territories.
In British Columbia, the wildfire situation is still serious tonight. About a dozen fires in the province pose a threat to public safety right now. Thankfully, in the central Okanagan, several evacuation orders have been downgraded to alerts. Many people are allowed back this weekend. But as Yvette Brand tells us, even emergency responders are coming home to heartbreaking scenes.
Shuswap firefighter Darren Reynolds walks through his Scotch Creek yard in BC's southern interior. The roses are cooked, one chicken coop charred. It took a few tries before he could look at his flattened home without tears.
It's cooked them, eh?
Sean Cobro is Deputy Regional Fire Chief of the CRSD.
I mean, I'm just absolutely amazed by the resiliency of these firefighters and their dedication and the way to their communities, the way they want to continue to serve. It's like there's no question to them. They just want to be out here. It's inspirational for me and touching. I mean, these people have lost everything. They were scattered. It was an incredibly chaotic time. But the second they had a chance, they were back here, trying to help their community whatever way they could.
Fundraisers are ramping up for Okanagan and Shuswap firefighters. More than a dozen lost their homes while fighting aggressive fires. Jason Brolin is fire chief of West Kelowna.
It's not necessarily the difficult work of firefighting anymore for my fire department. You know, we're starting to process all of the things that have happened to us. My focus now remains doing what I can to make sure that we get as many of you home. And we support those who lost their homes.
There is hope for rain. Not much, but at least it will cool things off, according to Jean Strong of the BC Wildfire Service.
Unfortunately, the precipitation that we're likely to receive over the next few days isn't going to be a miracle cure to end the fire season and put a stop on those fires that we do have out there. However, it will help our crews.
The flow of people into temporary evacuation centres is slowly reversing as some people now head home. For others, no word yet and no timeline. For those who have homes to go back to, it's time to sort through what remains. Michael Shapcott, Executive Director of the Sorrento Centre.
First task for all of my staff is to make our homes healthy and safe, and that involved, of course, emptying freezers, doing a lot of cleanup.
Business owners like West Kelowna winemaker Jason Parks face dire times. The usually bustling tourist cities are like ghost towns.
Well, that's the doom and gloom of it all. It's really bad because of the no travel advisory and what's happening with very good reason. It's to not come here. There is no business in the places. So right now, it's a lot of managing. I've got 120 employees, so it's managing their emotions and trying to keep them positive and giving people work while we can.
For others like Chris Bates and his young son Tyler, they're arriving in town, relieved to find homes standing.
Thankfully, everything was okay, so we really feel fortunate and lucky, very lucky.
Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
A prayer vigil is underway in Jacksonville, Florida, the city in mourning after a senseless act of racist violence on Saturday. Angela Carr, Anolt Laguerre, and Gerald Gallion, who are all black, were shot and killed at a dollar store by a white man motivated by hate. Katie Nicholson reports.
Let us pray, Lord, we thank you.
Parishioners hold hands in the pews of St. Paul AME Church in Jacksonville.
It's too much, it's too often. We keep going down the same paths. Over and over again.
And tears from Mayor Donna Deegan.
It feels some days like we're going backwards.
On Saturday, a white 21-year-old man in combat gear armed with a legally purchased AR-15 walked toward a Dollar General store in a predominantly black neighborhood.
Dollar General.
He fired 11 rounds into a sedan parked outside before entering the store. In all, he killed 3 people, a 52-year-old woman and 2 men aged 19 and 29. All 3 were black. Then he took his own life. Sheriff T.K. Waters says the 3 manifestos he left behind made it clear he hated black people.
The manifesto is, quite frankly, the diary of a madman. He was just completely irrational, but with his irrational thoughts, he was 100% lucid. He knew what he was doing.
That ideology didn't come out of nowhere, says Florida State Representative Angie Nixon.
We must be clear. It was not just racially motivated, it was racist violence that has been perpetuated by rhetoric and policies designed to attack Black people.
Florida has been locked in a months-long battle with educators, historians, and civil rights groups as it changes how Black history is taught in schools, including teaching children that Black people benefited from slavery because they learned important skills while enslaved. The shooting happened on the same day as hundreds gathered in D.C. for the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, where civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. delivered arguably his most famous speech.
I have a dream that one day men all over this nation will recognize that all men were created equal.
Today, his granddaughter Yolanda Renee King says the Jacksonville shooting shows the country still has far to go.
It's 60 years later, the dream still has not been fulfilled. We are not where we need to be.
This evening, a broken-hearted community in Jacksonville knows exactly where they need to be, at a vigil to remember the 3 people whose lives were extinguished simply because they were Black. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
The small Ontario city of Owen Sound has been shaken by the killing of a local restaurant owner. Sharif Rahman died days ago because of injuries from a violent assault over an unpaid bill. A funeral was held for him today. As Meg Roberts reports, residents of Owen Sound are now banding together for a man who was known for giving back.
Dozens of community members line the street in Owen Sound as the funeral procession for Sharif Rahman leaves the mosque for the Greenwood Cemetery. Today, friends like Wajahat Bande pay their respects to the 44-year-old restaurant owner who died last Thursday after a violent assault.
Such a great person, very nice, very gracious, very gentle person, down to earth, firm believer in God and firm believer in doing good things for the community.
Complete strangers to Rahman, like local resident Martha Tettenborn, also standing outside the mosque to offer her condolences today.
And we're all feeling the hurt of this. Yeah, because we really are.
Outside the curry house, which Rahman owned, dozens of bouquets of flowers have been laid on the doorstep. On August 17th, police say he was attacked by 3 male patrons, the dispute stemming from an unpaid dinner bill. He was put on life support, but a week later died in hospital. Close friend Miranda Miller says Rahman has donated dozens of free meals to people in the community. His death, she says, doesn't add up.
He would have fed those people. He has fed many people in our community, and I cannot imagine that he lost his life over someone not wanting to pay the bill.
Uthman Quick with the National Council of Canadian Muslims says he hopes police investigate all possible motives.
If this could be hate motivated or not, that is something that shouldn't be taken off the table. We want to encourage the authorities in Owen Sound to really look into this matter as deeply as possible.
Police are searching for 3 white men, 2 of them believed to be in their mid-20s to mid-30s, and the third in his 40s or 50s. They were seen driving away from the restaurant in an early 2000 model Ford Escape or Mazda Tribute. Despite the motive, Mayor Ian Boddy says the close-knit community is horrified.
It's been a very challenging week for everyone who lives in Owen Sound with this event. Everybody loved him that met him.
Fiercely devoted to helping his community, the community now stepping up to offer that kindness back. Family friend Mark Barbosa has set up a GoFundMe page for Rahman's wife and 6-year-old daughter. More than $200,000 have been raised.
He would help anybody who needed anything. I mean, he did.
Tonight, as the city searches for answers, flags have been lowered to half-mast at City Hall, where community members will gather and pay tribute to Sharif Rahman with a silent walk. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Windsor, Ontario.
An economic bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa is expanding. BRICS agreed last Thursday to welcome Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE to the group, and has left the door open for dozens more countries in the future. The expansion would double the group's membership in an effort to reshuffle the post-war global order, Rebecca Collard reports.
Today's global governance structures reflect yesterday's world.
It was an unusual admission by the head of the United Nations. Speaking at the BRICS summit in South Africa, Antonio Guterres told leaders from mostly developing nations that the global order must change.
For multilateral institutions to remain truly universal, they must reform to reflect today's power and economic realities.
Institutions like the UN and its agencies were created in the wake of the Second World War, with the interests of the war's victors embedded in their design.
But in 1945, when this global architecture came into being, countries of Africa were still colonized. Countries in Asia were becoming decolonized.
Sanusha Naidu is a senior research fellow at the Institute for Global Dialogue in South Africa. She says those institutions have polarized the world in favor of the U.S. and its Western allies. Speaking at the summit, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa pointed to the colonial-like extractive economic relationships many African states still have with the West, saying BRICS is an opportunity to build new economic relations.
So that African countries do not export rock and sand, but export finished products.
Mohammed Farouk is with the German Institute for Global and Area Studies.
There are a lot of grievances that these countries share. The East is rising. They think why the West should have all the power and all the tools of power. And then there's the issue of sanctions.
When Russia invaded Ukraine last year, some countries in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa refused to join Western-led sanctions against Russia, feeling it wasn't in their interest, economically or politically. In a video addressed to BRICS, Vladimir Putin said Russia would remain a reliable source of food and energy for friendly states.
For those who are friends with the West, such as Saudi Arabia, there's a second playing field that is very much reliable from their perspective. And for those that are boycotted from the Western playing field, such as Iran and Russia, then there is a playing field.
But the question is, how real is that playing field? U.S. officials have repeatedly downplayed the significance of BRICS, despite the fact that it already represents 40% of the world's population. The current and potential new members range greatly from small democracies to large authoritarian states. And Naidu says,
BRICS will have internal problems. They will have internal challenges. But like any political organization, they'll have to deal with it.
If the 6 new members join in January, BRICS Plus, as it's being called, will represent some 3.7 billion people and a larger portion of the global economy than the G7. On top of that, BRICS says 40 other countries have expressed interest in joining, a potential that cannot be dismissed. Rebecca Cullett for CBC News, Berlin.
Iran's government has filed a lawsuit against a well-known singer for releasing a song calling on women to remove their headscarves. The song Ruzarito, meaning your headscarf in Farsi, is the latest protest song by singer and activist Mehdi Yarahi. Iran's government has called the song illegal. Yarahi is now in hiding, according to sources close to him. Ruzarito also incorporates the slogan Woman, Life, Freedom, which was adopted by the protesters who took to the streets and social media following the death of Mahsa Amini last year. The 22-year-old died in police custody. She'd been arrested for improperly wearing her headscarf. Russia's investigative committee says Yevgeny Prigozhin is now confirmed dead. Investigators say molecular genetic testing was used to identify his body. The Wagner Group leader and 9 other people died when his private jet crashed northwest of Moscow last Wednesday. The crash happened exactly 2 months after Prigozhin led his mercenaries into Russia in a failed revolt. The Kremlin denies it was behind the crash. Well, far from the Eiffel Tower and the banks of the Seine, millions of people live in France's suburbs, where many of the residents are immigrants and rates of poverty are high. Those suburbs made international headlines this summer after riots sparked by the police killing of a 17-year-old during a traffic stop. Soon the whole country was protesting against police brutality. Freelance reporter Estelle Jonjo spoke to activists in Paris about their vision for the future of policing in France.
1 block from my apartment, in the east suburb of Paris, the police station has burned down. It was set on fire during the unrest over the police killing of Naël Merzouk during a traffic stop. In 2007, Fatou Dieng's brothers, Lamine, died of suffocation during an arrest. Fatou Dieng created Vivolé, Stolen Lives, which bring together families broken by police violence.
Selon moi, il est plus que temps de définancer la police.
In my opinion, it's time to defund the police. It's inconceivable to think that the police, the armed wing of the state, is here to serve and protect citizens.
Yazid Kerfi has reached a similar conclusion. The social worker, teacher, and ex-convict says underprivileged neighborhoods will be better served by social services than law enforcement.
On est toujours en France dans des politiques sécuritaires.
When things go wrong, there's always more video surveillance cameras, more prisons built, more police. I say more social workers, more mediators, more educators.
Plus d'éducateurs.
France used to have la police de proximité, the community police force, which aim to foster relation between police and local communities. It was disbanded in 2003 by Nicolas Sarkozy, the interior minister at that time. Kerfi says when law enforcement is not close to the community, there is less public trust and more aggressive policing.
Elle n'intervient que quand il y a des problèmes.
The police always intervene in times of conflict. At a given time when there is conflict, we know the people. We can intervene more easily.
Fatou Kébé is reluctant about defending the police, but advocates for reform.
Regarding the restoration of the police institution, I firmly believe that it is possible. It means tackling deep-rooted issues such as systemic racism, discrimination, and the culture of silence.
Kébé is a former police officer. She was arrested after denouncing racist slurs uttered by her co-workers. Today she works as a reporter and trains people on their rights during discrimination police stops. She wants the government to take stronger measures to root out racism in policing.
The measures put in place by the government to eradicate racism in the police and improve their relationship with the population, such as police training, are not enough. I think including an elimination test focusing on the psychology of the candidate in terms of racism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination could already help sort it out.
But for Fatou Dieng, reforming the police is not the solution.
To say abolish the police still scares many people. We have to be able to take as many responsibilities from the police service as possible.
Estelle Janjo for CBC News, Paris.
The World Athletics Championships have wrapped up in Hungary, and Team Canada has had one of its best showings ever. 6 medals in total, 4 of them gold. For more on the standout Canadian athletes, I spoke to freelance sports reporter Ed Kleiman a little earlier. Ed, Canadians have made history at this competition, including at the decathlon, where Pierce Lepage won Canada's first gold in this event, and Canada's longtime decathlon specialist, Olympic champ Damian Warner, took silver. What is behind this 1-2 punch of the Canadians in the decathlon, this success story?
Yeah, what a success story it is. I mean, a little bit bittersweet to Stephanie, because Damian Warner, the only thing missing from his resume was a world championship gold medal, and this was his time to get it. And who stops him from getting it? His buddy, his protege, Pierce Lepage, who was phenomenal, had one of the best performances in the decathlon ever, and he'd been building up to this. He's 27 years old, actually beat Damian Warner earlier this year, but for Canada to come 1-2, they're both thrilled about that, and it's going to be really exciting to see what these two guys can do in the Olympics.
Now, that's not the only event, though, where history was made. What are some of the other performances that stood out to you?
Well, I'll tell you, I think we can rename track and field and track for at least a week or so for what Canadians did in the throwing events. Just phenomenal. In the hammer throw, where Canada has never done anything before. Gold in the women's Gold in the men's. Cameron Rogers, 24 years old from Richmond, BC, only got into the hammer throw when she was hanging out with her mom at work, who's a hairdresser, and someone who's in a track club said, "Why don't you come down and try this hammer throw thing? You might find it fun." And she not only found it fun, she was a champion just a couple of years later in high school. And the next thing you know, she's winning a silver medal at the World Championships. She's a phenomenal talent. And on the men's side, just totally stunning. 21-year-old Ethan Katzberg from Nanaimo, BC, 6'6", super talent. Who knows how good he's going to be? And then to cap it off, Sarah Mitten from Nova Scotia, 27 years old. She's been building toward this, having done a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games and a silver medal now. That's just phenomenal stuff. But I will mention one other thing on the track, and that's Marco Arop in the 800 meters. Again, another event where Canada historically has not done all that well. Utterly dominant. He is a clear number one in the world. He was absolutely steamrolling the competition in this heat. Took it to the mall in the semifinal as well. And then in the final, did it a completely different way. Was in last place for half the race and then just blew by everybody. And you saw this guy is phenomenal. Again, look ahead to the Olympics. I think he is the guy to watch.
You said it. It truly was a phenomenal race, that one. But unfortunately, a different kind of story in sprinting, particularly from someone we've come to expect a lot of, right? What happened with Andre de Grasse?
You know, he's coming off some serious injury problems, particularly a foot issue, and he had COVID. So he came in not great form. But Andre de Grasse, who is just a great competitor, still found a way to get through to the 200-meter final. So no medals for him, but he did get there. The problem he had was that 200-meter final, that was on the same night as the 100-meter sprint relay heats, where he's always been so important for Canada's success. And he decided to save himself for the 200-meter, did not partake in that 100-meter heat. And what happened? Canada didn't even make the final. Canada's the defending gold medalist in that event from the Olympics. So expectations were really high. So they've got some work to do heading into the Olympics on the sprinting side for sure.
When you're looking at the Canadian squad as a whole over this past competition, how do you think things are shaping up for the next Olympics, Paris 2024?
Well, we'll put it this way. 4 gold medals at the World Championships. Only the United States had more than Canada. That's saying something. So the most gold medals Canada's ever had at this event. We get these throwers continuing to throw. We get Marco Arop continuing to improve. We get the sprinters back. You can imagine how good the Olympics could be. Expectations will be high, but they should be high. It's going to be really interesting to see what these Canadian athletes can do in Paris.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Ed.
Thanks, Stephanie.
That's sports journalist Ed Kleiman.
I have a dream. I got a dream. One day. We're gonna work it out. One day. We're gonna work it out.
As we mentioned earlier, tomorrow marks the 60th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington and Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. This weekend, thousands gathered once again on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, including Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter, Yolanda Renee King.
If you look like me, you could have fewer voting rights on your 18th birthday than America promised you on the day you were born. If you're a young woman like me, you could have fewer personal rights. And no matter who you are, you could be less safe from random gun violence and irreversible climate change.
And civil rights leaders like Reverend Al Sharpton, who referenced the famous speech.
The dreamers will win. The dreamers will march. The dreamers will stand up. Black, white, Jewish, LGBTQ. We are the dreamers. We're the children of the dream. Let us march in the name of the dreamers. Let's stand up together, arm in arm.
For 60 years, I Have a Dream has been inspiring even more than other speeches. It's also been sampled in several songs, like Common and will.i.am's A Dream from 2006. Further back, another tribute by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, who released The King in 1988.
We'll be free at last. We'll be free at last.
Some have been less literal. Sam Cooke released his iconic, unofficial anthem of the civil rights movement less than a year after King's speech.
It's been a long time coming, but I know
That change is gonna come was partly inspired by the message in I Have a Dream, with a similar hope of a brighter future, one that today's dreamers continue to fight for. We'll leave you with some more of Sam Cooke on The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Good night.
I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come.